Good evening, all, and thank you for tuning in to tonight's story. If you enjoy it, please remember to subscribe and like the video so we can continue bringing you more horror stories. Now, without further ado, take a deep breath and relax as we take a journey through the night. I woke to pain, a deep, gnawing ache spreading through my jaw like fire under my skin. It throbbed in waves, dull at first, then sharp enough to make my vision pulse. I ran my tongue along my teeth, expecting to feel something cracked, something loose, but everything was whole. The discomfort didn't fade, even after I swallowed 2 painkillers with a mouthful of stale water. By noon, the ache had worsened. Eating was impossible. Each bite sent bolts of agony deep into my gums. I tried to chew a slice of bread and nearly blacked out when something shifted inside my mouth. Then it happened. I felt a tooth give. It didn't wiggle, didn't loosen over time. 1 second it was there. The next it slid free like a pearl pulled from sand. A sharp gasp left my throat as I spat it into my palm. Smooth, slick with saliva. The root was intact, pink and raw. I barely had time to register the horror before another came loose. Then another. They dropped from my gums one by one, clicking against the sink as I heaved over it, gripping the porcelain. My reflection in the mirror trembled. My lips, wet with spit, parted as I forced myself to look. Inside, empty sockets gaped where my teeth had been. I exhaled sharply, expecting darkness, expecting nothing. But something moved, a shift, a writhing. Then they came, thin, pale, segmented things, pushing their way from the empty spaces, wet and glistening. Worms. I gripped the counter harder, breath shallow, pulse hammering in my ears. They slithered forward lazily, curling over the edges of my raw gums, wriggling as if testing the air. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I reached up with trembling fingers, barely aware of what I was doing. The tips of my nails brushed something soft, something slick. The worm reared back at the contact, twisting, squirming, before burrowing back inside. Into my gums, I screamed. The mirror rattled as I slammed both hands against the sink, a strangled cry tearing from my throat. My tongue flailed, trying to push them out, but they only twisted deeper, nestling into the pockets where my teeth had been. Something shifted in the back of my throat, a tickle, a twitch. I coughed violently, gagging as something long and slick wriggled its way from my tonsils. I caught it in my palm before I could think. A single writhing worm, milky white, its tiny mouth opening and closing, tasting the air. I flung it to the floor, scrambling backward. My heel caught the edge of the rug, and I went down hard, breath punching from my lungs as I hit the tile. From this angle, I could see under the sink. Something was moving there. Shadows pulsed and quivered. Pale, wet things wriggling over one another in a seething, writhing knot. My stomach clenched. A faint chittering sound filled the air. I crawled away, forcing myself upright, forcing myself to move. My phone. I needed help. A doctor. Someone. Anyone. I stumbled into my bedroom, clawing through the mess on my nightstand, hands shaking so violently I knocked over a glass of water. My phone wasn't there. The sound came again. Louder this time. I turned, breath catching in my throat. The door to the bathroom stood open, darkness yawning beyond it. I took a step back, then another. My heel hit the frame of my bed. A noise slithered through the air, a slow, wet rustling, like something peeling itself free from damp earth. I ran out of my bedroom, down the hall, bare feet slapping against cold tile. I barely made it to the kitchen before my legs gave out. I collapsed against the counter, my pulse erratic, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Something wet trickled down my chin. I wiped at my mouth, expecting blood. Instead, a pale, wriggling body smeared across the back of my hand. I gagged, retching, my stomach twisting into knots. My head spun. I needed to get out. I lurched toward the front door, gripping the handle, yanking. It didn't budge. I wrenched at the lock, twisting, pulling, shoving my shoulder against the wood. Nothing. Behind me, a wet chittering rose, higher, louder. I turned. The hall was dark. Something moved within it. A shape, tall, pale, white. My breath caught. I couldn't see its face, didn't want to, but I could feel its gaze. The chittering filled my skull, echoing in my bones. The creature moved, sliding, gliding over the floor as if its legs weren't touching the ground. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. My heel caught on the rug. I fell. A flash of movement. A shape descending, limbs unfolding, stretching. The last thing I felt was something cold and slick slipping into my mouth. Nestling deep inside, curled beneath my tongue. Another worm. Lunch period started the same as it always did. An endless shuffle of sneakers on tile, the murmur of impatient students waiting in line, the acrid scent of something fried lingering in the air. I took my place, dragging my tray along the metal railing, staring down at what passed for nourishment in this place. Mashed potatoes slopped onto my plate in a mound that quivered slightly, peas wrinkled and grayish green, rolling aimlessly. A slab of meatloaf, or something resembling it, coated in a thin, oily glaze. I sighed and moved along, ignoring the way the lunch lady's eyes lingered on me. She was new. I'd never seen her before. The usual staff had been replaced overnight with unfamiliar faces, all wearing the same vacant expression. The woman serving mashed potatoes locked onto me as she scooped, her grip on the ladle so tight her knuckles had gone bloodless. Her eyes didn't blink. Something about her stare made my stomach tighten, but I forced a nod and shuffled away, heading for the long cafeteria tables. The first scream shattered the dull hum of conversation just as I took my seat. A sharp, panicked wail, cutting through the air like a jagged knife. Heads snapped up, forks clattered onto trays. Another scream followed, then another, a cacophony of agony, so piercing and raw it made my ribs feel like they were closing in. I stood, craning my neck. Across the room, bodies were writhing on the floor, their limbs jerking unnaturally. A girl clutched her throat, eyes bulging, a stream of thick red bubbling past her lips. A boy's hands trembled violently before his fingers bent backward with an audible snap, his mouth yawning wide in a silent howl. Everywhere, students collapsed, their bodies folding in on themselves like marionettes with their strings slashed. The lunch lady stood motionless, watching, waiting. The heavy-set woman who had served me potatoes turned her gaze toward the chaos, her lips curling upward. The man behind the cash register wiped his hands on his apron, smearing something dark across the fabric. I stumbled backward, knocking my tray to the ground. The sound was swallowed by the growing wails around me. Run, I thought. But my feet felt like they'd been filled with cement. Then she moved. The head lunch lady, towering and wiry, her uniform tight across her gaunt frame, lifted a hand. Her fingers twitched once, and the others obeyed. They descended upon the students like wolves. I barely had time to react before a body slammed into mine, sending me sprawling. The kid next to me clawed at my arm, his eyes wild, pleading. His mouth opened, but before any words could escape, a shadow loomed over him. A spork, a cheap plastic utensil, its prongs jagged and crude. But in her grip, it sank through flesh like it was made of steel. Brendan convulsed as she buried it deep into his throat. His scream strangled into a wet gurgle. Blood fanned across my shirt in a fine spray. I choked back bile, scrambling away, hands slipping in something warm. The cafeteria had erupted into bedlam. Students ran, some smashing into chairs, others tripping over bodies. The doors locked. Someone pounded against them, a fist hammering so hard their knuckles split, but they wouldn't budge. Another scream, a teacher's this time, cut short with a sickening crunch. I crawled beneath a table, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the noise. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Plastic forks and spoons weren't supposed to be weapons. Lunch ladies weren't supposed to be executioners. And yet, a boy collapsed inches from my hiding spot, his throat gouged open. A lunch worker stood over him, calmly adjusting the cap on her head. Her hands, slick with crimson, tightened around the spork. The sound of footsteps neared my table. I pressed a hand over my mouth, struggling to keep my breath quiet. A pair of shoes stopped beside me. Then a voice, low, measured. "You haven't eaten your lunch." I froze. The hem of a stained apron drifted into view, swaying gently as she crouched. "Eat up, dear," she murmured, voice honeyed but flat. "It's not polite to waste." My fingers curled around the only thing I had left, my flimsy cafeteria knife. Not much of a weapon, but it was something. I lunged, the blade plunged into her arm, sinking up to the hilt. Her smile didn't waver. She simply tilted her head, peering down at the wound like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. Her free hand shot out, gripping my wrist. I screamed as she twisted. My bones snapped with a loud pop. The knife tumbled from my grasp, clattering against the tile. She hauled me up with inhuman strength, dragging me out from under the table. I kicked, thrashed, but it was no use. The cafeteria was littered with bodies, the air thick with iron. The other lunch staff stood amid the wreckage, sporks clutched in their hands, their gazes turning toward me in unison. The head lunch lady leaned in, her breath hot against my ear. "Hush now," she crooned. "You'll ruin your appetite." Her spork glinted under the fluorescent lights. I barely had time to scream. The plastic tore through my flesh like paper, sinking deep, twisting. Pain erupted in a white-hot explosion, radiating through my ribs. My legs gave out. She let me fall. The world blurred, shapes melting together, voices warping into distant echoes. I heard the scrape of trays, the clink of utensils, and then chewing, slow, wet. The last thing I saw before the dark swallowed me was a tray being placed in front of the remaining students. And on it, a fresh serving of mashed potatoes, slick with something that wasn't gravy. I don't know when it started. The first time, maybe it was an accident. A man looked at me, his eyes met mine, and suddenly his mouth wrenched open. a sound pouring out that was nothing human. His face twisted, veins bulging at his temples, pupils dilating in sheer terror. Then he turned and ran. I thought he was crazy. But then it happened again, and again, and again. I was in a grocery store just trying to pick out something to eat when a little girl spotted me. Her balloon slipped from her fingers as her mouth stretched into an awful, soundless gape. A heartbeat later, she screamed, high and broken, before her mother yanked her close and bolted, shoving the cart aside. A barista dropped a cup of scalding coffee on himself as I stepped into line, his shriek almost deafening. A woman on the bus locked eyes with me, sucked in a breath, and started clawing at the window like she'd rather fling herself into traffic than sit another moment near me. I didn't understand. I checked my reflection in a store window, but all I saw was my own face. Tired, confused. Nothing wrong. But then I found her. She was the only one who didn't react like the others. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stared. At first I thought maybe she couldn't see me, but that wasn't it. Her eyes locked onto mine with unnerving certainty. She noticed me all right. And I noticed her. That's why I started following her. I don't think she knew at first. I was careful, always a few steps behind, watching, waiting. She worked at a bookstore downtown, one of those tiny tucked away places with yellowed pages and a bell over the door. I lingered outside at first, pretending to scan the display, my reflection shifting in the glass. I watched her move inside, filing books onto shelves, her head tilting slightly whenever a customer spoke to her. She was quiet, never spoke much, never wasted words. She saw me one night when I was standing beneath the streetlight across from her apartment. She was on the second floor, a small space with thin curtains that barely covered the window. I thought she'd close them when she noticed me. She didn't. She just looked. I stayed, and when she shut off the light, I waited. The nights turned into weeks, then months. I memorized her routine. When she left, when she came back. I stood near the bookstore during the day, just to see if she would glance my way. Sometimes she did, sometimes she didn't. It wasn't enough. I had to be closer. The first time I stepped inside her apartment, I didn't take anything. I just stood there, breathing in the scent of her space, a trace of vanilla, the faded remains of old paper. It felt right. The second time I sat in her chair, ran my fingers over the book she left on the coffee table, picked up her scarf and pressed it to my face. The third time, I watched her sleep. She didn't scream. I stood at the foot of her bed, waiting. The moonlight stretched across the blankets, catching the soft curve of her cheek. I thought she might wake up and see me, that maybe this time she would finally speak, but she didn't. She only turned in her sleep, her breathing steady, calm. I hated how much I wanted to touch her. I hated how much I wanted her to see me the way I saw her. I don't know when she figured it out. Maybe she noticed the books moved slightly out of place. Maybe she smelled something unfamiliar lingering in the air. Maybe she felt me there before she ever truly saw me. But one night, when I was standing by her bedside, she opened her eyes. She didn't scream. She only blinked, slow and deliberate, her gaze sharp in the dark. Then she said, "I was wondering when you'd show yourself." I had never heard her voice before. It was soft, measured, not afraid. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt something. Instead, I felt small. She sat up, the blanket shifting, her head tilting as she studied me. I wanted to step back, but my feet wouldn't move. "You've been watching me," she said. I tried to answer. but the words caught in my throat. She sighed, shaking her head. You don't know, do you? I frowned. She leaned forward, the dim light catching in her eyes. I see what they see. My stomach dropped. Number that wasn't possible. She never screamed. She never ran. Would you like to know? She asked. I tried to shake my head, but she reached out before I could. Her fingers touched my wrist and everything cracked apart. The room around us bled away, the air thick and humming. I saw it, not through my eyes, but through hers. My face, or what should have been my face. The flesh was torn and gnarled, curling back in jagged strips. Beneath it, something writhing, shifting, pushing outward. My mouth stretched down where my jaw should have ended, filled with teeth and two tongues. I wasn't human. I had never been human, and she had known all along. She let go. The room snapped back into place, but I felt like I had been torn apart. I staggered, reaching up to touch my face, but I didn't want to know what my fingers would find. Her expression didn't change. You've been haunting me, she said, but I think you have it backward. My breath shuddered out. I turned and ran. For the first time I ran, and for the first time she followed.